What's going on, Soul Nation? Ginger Prime here with State of the Game Week 3 for Torchlight. They've got this posted, and I'll include a link in the description below. But as you can see here on the screen, it is a massive post. So just kind of sit back, buckle up, and we're going to go ahead and dive into it. Now, the last time I did a State of the Game covering this information, I think there were those out there wanting more of my personal opinion about the state of the game, about how I'm playing it, how it feels. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that actually at the front of this video. Typically, especially with news posts, I try to keep my opinion to a minimum or put it at the end. However, I know a lot of people are very passionate, frustrated, happy. There's a wide range of emotion when it comes to the state of Torchlight 3. So I'll go ahead and put that now. If you guys don't want or care about my opinion, totally cool with me. Check the playhead of this video or the description. You can kind of just jump into this full-on, massive post that they have sit down and wrote up. And essentially, if you're still with me, if you're still with his opinion, obviously I think there is just a lot of frustration with how Torchlight 3 launched, with the state of the game, especially when you compare it to Torchlight 2. That being said, what we're about to cover in this video with this full-on detail is incredibly humbling. It's incredibly insightful. It really kind of lifts the veil on issues and things that they're experiencing. And I think if nothing else, from the developer and what they're trying to make and what they want to release, that is something that is very pro player, pro community. It is for me as a developer myself, incredibly insightful. And at the same time, I'm really quite blown away by their level of transparency. You might not be, and that's perfectly fine. Overall, I enjoy the game, but I struggle to make it a part of my regular play game. By play game, I mean, I struggle to find that it is not the game that I'm like, I have to be playing it all the time. This is a game that I like to play at the end of the day. I like to play it very casually in a relaxed manner. It's something that I'm enjoying every time I do log into play, but it's not something that it's right now my be-all, end-all. That happens to be Destiny 2. Destiny 2 has just sucked me back in, especially with content that is quote-unquote going away. I am focused in that area. Why do I bring that up here? Well, essentially, I know my characters are going to be wiped out, and so while I am very interested in trying to build out some guides for this game, because based off of what we're going to cover again, I think this game's going to have legs. I think this is going to be a game that is going to exist for a long time. Now, if you fast forward to a year from now and they've shut it down because no one's playing it, no one's paying for it, well, eggs on my face at that point. However, there is something here. And you can kind of tell, when you go look at other games that have really struggled out of the gate right now, and I could say Crucible is the latest example of a game that it didn't really have a soul, and you kind of felt it. This at least feels that there's a soul and there's magic here to be had. There's something that draws me in and makes me want to log in and update the game and keep following it because I enjoy my time with it. There's a little bit of oddity, and so will this ultimately be the MMORPG to end all MMORPGs that's also kind of the asymmetric action? I have no idea. Diablo 4 is going to be sometime around the corner, but you also have Path of Exile. There's a lot of people who do this stuff right. And obviously there's always a risk with it involved. I think that if they continue to do what they're doing today and showing me with this post, I think that there's a lot of hope for this game, and it should be written off just because it had login errors and issues as a part of early access. But it's your money, it's your time. Manage it accordingly. I would not yet invest in this. This is not me saying go out and buy this game and dive into it right now, because I'm still concerned about that character wipe. It's still a paid beta in that mind, but it's something that I'm thrilled to be able to provide my feedback for, and I'm having fun with it overall. I'd have more fun with it if it was on more platforms as a part of early access with crossplay, but since that doesn't exist, I'm regulated to playing this at a certain period of time on a certain day. It's not something I can sit here and just play all the time like I can with Destiny, with cross save, I can jump in on multiple platforms, which means for me, I can play it on multiple TVs. I can play it around my kids, and I can, not play it around my kids. I have a lot of flexibility there. Here, I'm typically, it's installed on the office computer. I guess I'm, going to play it after work. So that's my thoughts. That's my opinion. Let's go ahead and dive into this massive, massive post. And if for some reason I earn your sub, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to make sure I gave you a good shout out in a future video, and just let me know if this is the video that has you hit that subscribe button. All right, let's dive in. During early access, we want players to get up to the moment information about what's going on with the game and dev focus. This week's State of the Game letter comes from Guy, the lead programmer of Ekra. Sometimes the best possible way to look at the future of a project is to understand its past. While the next week's State of the Game will take a deeper dive into the upcoming updates, ongoing issues, and other community feedback, this State of the Game is for those who enjoy a good technical read and want to post-mortem on early access from the weekend's launch. It was written shortly after the early access launch weekend in order to retain as many of the details as possible. Wow, what an exciting weekend it's been. On Saturday morning, we launched Torchlight 3 for early access on Steam, and after having been in the alpha and the beta for 15 months, and after a year of having live players from all over the world playing the game, we developed a lot of technology and procedures for developing changes, fixing issues, investigating problems, triaging bugs, and the other fine-grained multitude of running a live service. This game's servers at game clients has been running fairly smoothly, so we felt prepared to open up the floodgates. Life likes to throw curveballs, and we have a ton thrown at us over the course of the last weekend. Our team was up through the weekend chasing down problems, and now that things have settled down and our service seems to be in better shape, it's worth taking a look back. So let's go on a journey and release to see what happened and how we fixed it. Our live team got together early Saturday morning, or at least early for game developers at 10 a.m., as we had a build ready to go. And being white-gloved by QA, white-glove test is a test that QA does on a build where there are no other players on to check it for dust. And that is to make sure that there are no surprise issues. That process was completed around 10:30 a.m. with no fanfare, and the game was available for purchase on Steam. After 11 a.m., Max went out at the PC Game Show to talk about Torchlight 3, told people that it's live now. So much for no fanfare. Thus opened the floodgates and people started playing, and for a while, things seemed to be going well. Our concurrent users, CCU numbers, went from 0 up to a few thousand in a very short time frame. Very quickly, though, we started getting reports of players disconnecting and failing to log in and failing to travel across zones. The team jumped into an action like Cheetah and the Pogo Stick, and we determined that there were likely two root causes here: service scaling and server reaping. Most of our backend services were horizontally scalable. That means that if one of the services is under a high load, that we can bring up more instances of it to handle the load, and we did exactly just that. We need to handle one of these problems. In fact, that this load was so high was indicative of other problems, and it increases the resources allotted to those services help resolve those issues while we investigated the root causes. The other problem was server reaping. For some reason, the services that were monitoring our game servers were not getting informed on those servers and the players on them, and we tracked them to a connection issue and the disconnect stopped. These next two problems resolved, and now a mere stable service, and players started returning to the new set of problems. This time the problems manifested as quest progresses started taking a very long time to appear, if at all. You could still play, but the game would be subtly broken, and around the same time we were getting reports of players being unable to create characters. We tracked the quest problem to the database configuration issue that was caused in the responses from the database to the backend services to be slow. Unfortunately, in order to deploy those changes, we needed to take the game down briefly, and our expectation was that we'd be down for around 10 minutes, and so we told people to expect 20 minutes of downtime. And 30 minutes after we started the downtime, we were finally able to bring up the servers. The other issue was that we were trying to track down is that some people weren't able to create characters. Fortunately, this was an easy one. Log files from the affected players all indicated that these people were attempting to name their pets using Cyrillic characters, which is disallowed by the services, and accidentally allowed by the game client. And we fixed this with one in the client, but in the meantime, we just informed those players about the restriction. We're all good now, right? Well, there are still some disconnects and other issues, but towards the end of the day, we felt as though we were good enough and in good enough shape that all could be able to go to sleep. And we had some inklings that there were still more issues, but we only had a few shots in the dark to try to fix them before bed. Of course, the world is round, and Europe and Asia were about to jump in and get their respective peak times, and several of our team members were up through the night watching the EU and Asia servers go bad. People didn't seem to be crashing out, but they did seem to continuously be disconnecting. The next morning, our first impulse was to have the load issues is to scale up services, which we did as quickly as we could, and we were bringing up servers with our data center as well as our cloud providers. Unfortunately, the cloud provider has a rate limit on how frequently they're willing to grant IP addresses, something like 2 per minute, so that severely limited how frequently we could bring up the extra load. Each Sunday morning, or early Sunday morning, then one of our developer engineers said, in a very polite and timid fashion, it seems like we're trying to run in a way that it's not sustainable. This whole thing with loading up 20 zones per player isn't going to work in the long term. Wait, what? 20 zones per player? That's not how our game is supposed to work at all. Our game serves are a piece of hardware which runs a whole bunch of processes that we call zones, or sometimes in-game servers. Each zone runs in the game world out of a collection of areas. For example, Edgewood Bluff, Heroes Rest, and the Den of Upheaval will all be hosted by a single zone process. How many zones can we expect to have per player? Well, we've got a collection of zones that you're in. Maybe the last zone that you just came from, maybe in a town, maybe your fort. That's a maximum of 4, but we could or should be averaging somewhere around 1.2 to 1.5 zones per player. How do we end up with 20 zones? That's insanity. Something is wrong and we were measuring or doing it, but that's not right. So zombie zones. Now that we know that we had a problem, we inspected the process on the servers that were running and saw some defunct processes called zombie processes, which gave rise to the nickname zombie zones. A defunct process in Linux is a process in which it has to be killed, but is still lingering. It would still hold on to some minor resources such as the file handles and such, but it's officially dead, but not gone. Thus zombies. Though we did not realize at the time that we found out that the zombies, we later discovered these zombie processes were actually counting towards the capacity of the servers and would ask the server if it had more capacity to spin up a new zone, and it would say, no, I'm full up. But it was full of zombies, not actual zones. At this point, we had to do two things. We had to kill all the zombies, and we had to figure out why the zombies were appearing in the first place. In order to kill the zombies for now, we actually just rebooted each of the servers in order to free up the capacity. Players could then start taking up that free space, and we knew that the zombies would be coming back, and we needed to fix the underlying issue. It was like playing whack-a-mole, and as soon as we had cleared up one set of servers, another one would get infested with zombies again. At this point, we were going to get a bit more technical, so we already discussed the zone servers, but here also the one single process that we can call zone controller, ZC, whose job it is to spin up and monitor the zone processes. So a message comes in, say from a player who wants to travel to the ZC, and it spins up a new zone process that responds with the instructions about how to travel to that zone. The ZC also has a few other tasks. It monitors the zones that spawn up, and if one of those thinks it isn't responding due to a crash or a hang, it kills it. It also reports back a lot of information such as what zones it's got and how much capacity it has, and what other players in that zones are up to in a server called Zone Lookup or ZL. Zone Lookup is another character in our story which will come up soon. Yeah, sweetheart? Come in. Yeah, I'm recording. Hi, Dad. Hi, kids. Alright, so now back to it after that. Upon examining the zone controller logs, we realized that we were sending a 1040 HTTP status code to the zone servers. When the zone server checks with the ZC and the ZC can examine the server state, it responds with a message indicating that the zone's server should shut itself down, and it would do this, for example, if it was observed that there were no players in that zone for a certain length of time. However, the 1040 code is actually a vestigial piece of technology right now because of a different piece of tech that we implemented. When all the players leave the zone server, the ZC will actually put the process to sleep using a Linux system call. In this mode, the process is not even scheduled by the operating system, so it consumes 0 CPU cycles. We take up the process if someone travels back there, if you're portal to town and thus your fort, and then return, but you never return and we never wake up that process. After the timeout occurs, we kill the process entirely. That makes it very surprising to see that these 410 codes are showing up. Under normal operation, we should see the 410S's being triggered and then seeing a lot of them, like a lot. On the individual ZC that manages 100 to 200 zones, we would be able to see 410 every 1 to 2 seconds. So that was a thing, and of course we're building up these zombie zones at the same time. Moving forward to a fix. Both the zombie zones and the 410S's seem to be related, and both of these problems seem to be pointed at the ZC, and so we started to dig into the code of the ZC and find the problem could be. The ZC stores a map containing information about all the zones. The map gets locked as a whole and the entire time the changes are made. And the subscripts can't read, that were there, the sum of the contention over the lock. The zone server sends the message to the ZC in a regular rate containing the information about itself and its player counts. The ZC updates the map in response to those messages. The 410 codes could be explained by the ZC and it's missing out on those updated messages or not processing them fast enough, and then the piece of code that checks the map coming in it and noticing that it hasn't heard from the zone or the server killing it, and thus there was an update message for the queue that just hasn't processed yet. We still didn't know why this was happening, and we were fairly confident that this is what was happening. Then unrelated problem, zone server spin-up time. Another issue is that we noticed is that the zone servers were taking a long time to spin up. Originally, it should take around 10 to 15 seconds, but the new zones were taking significantly longer to spin up for some reason. The issue seemed to be unrelated to the other issues. When it rains, it pours. So we traded the issue for the ZC reaching out to the content service, and we started a new zone, and the ZC gets information from which content version to use, and there are things like our spreadsheets, quests, recipes, etc. Originally, it requests this value every 5 minutes. However, the code was written in such that every new zone was trying to spin up while it was requesting that new content version would block waiting for the answer. So if it was slow, it would get an answer, and if it would, then we would think for a while. Then the new zones wouldn't come up for a long time because they were waiting for the content version. This is where we were starting to realize that if the upstream services like the zone lookup and the context services were lagging, that's when they were causing blocks in the ZC. And while we started investigating those issues, we rewrote how the ZC was getting the content version so that it would store a cache value and reuse that until a new answer comes back, blocking operations while locking. Now that we had saw that there were issues with blocks and communicating with the other services, we examined whether there was anything that we could be holding us out into a lock for long periods of time. And the first thing that we observed was that we had situations where we would take a lock of the map in the zones and then perform some operating system calls, and this would cause the process to be unscheduled and can potentially be long running. We rewrote those sections of code so that the OS is happening outside of the lock. Now that we had two fixes to try out, the content service cached value and the OS calls outside of the locks, we put both of these fixes into a single server and monitored that one server to see whether or not the situation had improved. After a few minutes, it was clear that the situation was a little better. A 410 code every 2 seconds instead of 2 times every second. And we were still seeing zombie servers, but it was still a problem. It was definitely some improvement, but there was still work to do. Rubber ducks and Go channels. At this point, it's back to the drawing board. We knew generally that there was a problem to be had to lie, and it didn't not have a specific root cause, so we busted out our rubber ducks. What a rubber duck has to do with it, the parable goes that a junior engineer walks into a senior engineer office to ask for help with a problem. The senior engineer stops the junior engineer short and hands over a rubber duck and says, "Tell it to the rubber duck, then tell it to me." Then he turns around and goes back to work. The junior engineer thinks it's weird but shrugs, and he starts to tell the rubber duck about the problem. Whatever I call this function, it crashes. But it's always on the last element of the list for some reason. Oh, that's because the element is one past the end, so it can't differentiate it. The junior engineer rushes off to fix the code. The moral is that oftentimes you just need to describe the problem to somebody else, anybody else, in order to realize what the problem is. Rubber duck debugging is a process of just having someone else describe to you how the problem works and then what the problem is. So we started asking the question about how the ZC works and how it spins up and monitors zones. As a part of this, one of our engineers noticed that we were sending events on a Go channel while holding on to the lock of the map. Most of our backend services are written using a Go programming language which has many low-level routines for concurrency and communication. One of these primitives is called a channel, and which is another queue that can have messages pushed to it from the other thread of execution and received from another thread of execution. These threads of execution are called Go routines. We discovered that the system was set up as such that the system would take a lock of the map of the zone servers, push some data to it into the channel, and make the request of the zone look up and then go to a loop monitoring the zone server progress. Originally, this would be fine because the data was getting pushed into the channel and would be buffered up. However, the buffer length is infinite and eventually the buffer gets filled up with other routines and try to hit up the zone lookup. So our procedure looked like this: start up a zone, wait for some network communication with zone lookup, monitor the zone. However, due to some slowness in zone lookup, the network communication could take multiple minutes to complete, and during that time, the routine that the monitoring the zone for liveliness would come in and see that the zone is empty and it isn't doing anything, or rather it appeared that way because the monitoring hadn't started yet, and then kill it. Finally, the network communication returned and it would continue the operation and start to monitor the already dead process. Now, the monitoring would detect that the process was dead and clean it up once it got there. However, because it was also waiting on the network communication that was taking multiple minutes to complete, these processes would stick around until the monitoring could go clean them up, thus zombie zones. So a fix for zombie zones. Now that we knew what was happening, we fixed the code that was doing this so we could start monitoring the process while it was waiting for the zone lookup. Once again, we deployed the change and still getting 410S zombie zones. It's definitely better, but the problem is still there. Fortunately, one of our engineers noticed that we were doing this pattern of multiple places, and then they were sending data to a Go channel that was waiting for a response. But now that we had a procedure for fixing them, we found all the instances where this was happening and fixed them by putting the channel communication into a Go routine so that it wouldn't block normal operation. Now that we had the understanding of the problem, this helped us explain a lot of the issues that we've been seeing. For example, the zone server sends an HTTP message to the ZC and waits asynchronously for a response. The ZC is blocked and its downstream operation for a long time. Meanwhile, the zone server is trying to send more HTTP requests and then waiting for responses, but the server also has further limited queue operations and is willing to wait for, and the end result is the zone server drops further requests without sending them, so we start to lose things like quest updates and character saves. So to reiterate, we are blocking the ZC's ability to monitor the zones, we're blocking up the zone server's ability to send messages, and we're leaving those zombie zones around which occupy capacity, which would actually go into the actual players. All these problems stacked up at the same time due to one pattern that we were using, which caused all sorts of badness. Stable service. It's now 4:10 p.m. on Sunday night. We deployed our fixes to a single ZC and starting watching it to see what happened. Everything looked good initially, and we waited 5 minutes excitedly. Everything was going great, and we waited 20 minutes impatiently, and we were make sure. After another 20 minutes, everything looked good, so we started deploying it out in waves to the rest of the servers across the infrastructure in the US, Europe, and Asia. Rolling this new change did require us to keep people off servers, but we did our best to make sure that players knew what was going on, and it was going to be temporary as we load out the stability fixes. After about an hour of rollouts, we declared the success on the issue, and the service is in good shape. Players are able to log in, travel, and play successfully for extended periods of time. It's not perfect yet. There are still issues that we were continuing to monitor and tackle, but our services were in much better place for those first 48 hours. We went to bed late Saturday, early morning, Monday morning, or Sunday, and woke up Monday somewhat later in the morning and for a day where our players were discussing skill respecs and other gameplay issues rather than complaining about not being able to play. In conclusion, in any distributed system, there's always going to be more than one root cause of a perceived issue. We had to dive through about 4 levels of other problems before we realized that the zombie zones were an issue in the first place. And then we were going to track down the problem, and there were several places in our code that we had to be fixed in the same way. The lesson here is that for the first impression of what the problem, the root cause, is unlikely to be the actual problem. So we need to constantly, be reevaluating the fundamental assumptions. As we move forward from this early access launch, we want to thank all of our fans and players for your patience as we've worked through these problems. And we know that we can be frustrating sometimes, but rest assured that we're working tirelessly to fix these problems and that we're listening to your concerns and feedback about the game. Sincerely, Guy. And that concludes this insane, epic state of the game post for Torchlight 3. Wow. There was a couple interruptions there. Hopefully I've been able to edit those out, make it a smooth sailing experience for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. We're going to keep you up to date on the progress with this game as it develops, we provide feedback, as we continue to play and level, and hopefully get some guides out for you on the characters. In the end, I hope that they make a game that we can all enjoy for years and years and years to come. I know that, again, expectations are what they are. And then they definitely weren't met for several people, especially those who've been enjoying Torchlight 2. In the end, my advice is still to continue to hold off, but we'll go ahead and leave it at that. For Ginger Prime, my name is Brian. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, please let me know in the comments or by hitting the like button. But with that, I'm going to wrap up. I hope you see you in my next video, and until then, take care. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. This video is sponsored by me. If you guys like podcasts and long-form content, I hope you check out Ginger Gaming Radio. Link will be in the description of this video below. So if you're still watching this video, thank you, and check out the new channel for more content, and hopefully you enjoy. Thank you.